Hello, and welcome to the Pages to Pixels podcast, where we talk about new movies every episode. I'm Kevin,
And I'm Keerthana.
and this week we're talking about Anora, directed by Sean Baker. The IMDb logline for Anora is: a young sex worker from Brooklyn meets and impulsively marries the son of an oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened. So, before we get into it, how much do you know about Sean Baker?
I do know that a lot of his filmography surrounds sex work and has been received very well for the way it portrays sex work. And I know you like a lot of his work.
Yeah, I have seen multiple of his films. I got the privilege to see Red Rocket at New York Film Festival a couple years ago. And then I also have seen The Florida Project, one of his earlier projects that was co-directed called Takeout. And I have seen Tangerine, which was all shot on an iPhone.
Yeah, so, I love that. I really think that filmmaking is going in that direction. And I really like that choice.
So you're saying that the next film that you shoot will be on an iPhone?
Hey, yeah, I mean, if I would have wanted to shoot my previous film on an iPhone, I just don't think that I know how to do that well yet. But yes, eventually I see, hopefully, most of my work going in that direction.
And with the, technology like improving, I think it just makes all that more likely in the long run.
I think it really comes down to how talented your DP is. And I'm sure that someone who's good at what they're doing will be able to make an iPhone work just as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. What did you think of Anora?
I loved it. I feel like it's been a minute since I started one of these podcasts with that sentence, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think everything about it, the tone, the pacing, the comedy, like all of it was spot on. How about you?
Yeah, I also loved it. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year. I don't know if I would say it is my favorite of the year, but it's already left a really big impression on me. Just for some context, Keerthana and I actually saw us together at the AMC, and it's been a little bit since we've seen it, but I think actually with some distance has gotten me to think about the film more and more over time. Yeah. It's also given some breathing room for a new meme to pop up, which it's such an unexpected one, but it's just one of Anora arriving at the mansion for the first time, like walking and smiling. But yeah, I really loved this movie. I think there are a lot of things that we can dive deeper in as we talk about it today on the podcast. So yeah. What for starters, what do you think is one of the strongest elements of the movie?
I think two elements really worked for me. One was the story, which I thought was really solid. I thought all the motivations made sense. I thought the humor was drawn from really natural, organic places. I think one of my biggest issues I have sometimes watching comedies is that the humor comes at someone's expense. If I don't agree with that perspective, it's hard for me to laugh in that situation. I think this movie very cleverly went around that problem, and they just made fun of everybody, which I really enjoyed. And I think the other thing that the movie did really well was that it consistently punched up, which is always fun to see. I also really like
as in like punching up at the rich, right?
Yeah, basically at like in any like hierarchy, right? It could be social, economic, whatever. If you punch up, it always makes for good comedy. So yeah, that really stood out to me. And I also really like the dialogue because I thought that the weird like world building choice that they made of like having like Russian, Armenian, and like New Yorkers in the same little bubble was so smart. I really enjoyed it. How about you?
Oh, I think one of the big things that I really enjoyed was Mikey Madison's performance. In general, all of the performances were really strong. There's like subtleties, and there's also like just pure like chaos in terms of like how these characters need to deliver their lines and also need to talk over each other. You know, this is not new for Sean Baker because I've seen his other films which have like a bunch of argument scenes, and this one probably has some of the most argumentative scenes of anyone. And setting it in Brooklyn is perfect because, you know, as a former Brooklynite, I think they really accurately portray like the language and the link and like the lingo and like how characters treat each other and approach one another. It's really accurate, but it's also really funny. I mean,
Yeah.
I could go on for hours about the small like character moments that come through in these argumentative scenes.
I know you said you enjoyed the performances, and I really enjoyed them too. For me, I thought that the dynamic between Vanya and Annie was really cool. It was
Yeah.
just like, I think from the beginning, I was just like, don't do that. Like, don't listen to him. Like, he's the son of an oligarch and like is willing to pay you $15,000 to be his girlfriend for a week. Like, nothing good can come out of this. But at the same time, I had a lot of fun in indulging in her choices. I just thought that was a very compelling dynamic, and it just like held the story together for me. Like, even though he disappears like midway through the film, I think like their relationship definitely like held things together for me.
Was there ever a point for you that you thought, and we are kind of treading into spoiler territory, so just be warned, but you should also watch this film, it's great. Do you think there was ever a point where you felt like Vanya actually did like Annie, or were you just never going to be convinced of that?
No, I don't think I was ever convinced of that. I think it was very obvious. I was convinced that he was never into her because in their very first like private session together, when she arrives at his house, he was like more than ready to get going. Like, there was no thing of like, hey, let's talk maybe, or like none of that, which I feel like would have been the natural maybe course of action if he was actually into her. Um, I guess she was just a dancer that he really liked, and that's really all it was. Even when he talked about the green card marriage, I was just like, that kind of doesn't make any sense because it doesn't work like that. Like, you can't just like marry someone and then like expect that you can't get deported. There's like a huge process in the middle. I kind of knew that that was going to unravel, but that was just because I had a little more information on the immigration system. Um, so I can see how that might have worked for other people. How about you? Did you think that, at any point he was into her?
I think in a crazy world there's like a chance that
Uh-huh.
they I felt like the love that Annie had for him was real, but it's because of everything he had done. I don't think it was because of anything personal connection that they had made. And I think that part of it is because the gifts that he's showering her in, he makes references to like his family and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, giving her the ring that was like his mother's. So I think that is something that definitely made her maybe endear to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I was pretty certain that this fairy tale that is
Mm-hmm.
hinted at in the logline was going to come crashing down on her. It was
Yeah.
just how much can she deny it and suppress it throughout the entire movie?
Yeah, I do think that a lot of her choices were driven by obviously circumstance, but also like the whole like fairy tale narrative that's maybe sold to young girls. Um, like, I can totally see how a character in her position would view him as like the Prince Charming that has come in and like saved her. And I think that's a big part of her arc, right? Is that she's learning that the real world is not how she hoped it would be, despite the fact that she
Right.
was coming from really difficult circumstances. Um, Solid story, solid characters, and I mean, I think one of the most appealing parts of the story to me was just how relentless she was. Like, how she
Yeah,
was just a
she
fighter
is
through
a
and through.
fighter.
Yeah, that fight sequence, that extremely long fight sequence that she had, where she just beat these men up, it was great. Uh, it was solid. I also really liked how she just weaponized her yelling too. It was, I thought, a very, very smart like directing choice.
Also, I wanted to say like the side character performances are also just as strong. Like I think
Yeah,
they're
off
playing
the
off of
charts.
each other
Mm-hmm.
perfectly. They all do seem like they're like family or related. And then like as the journey goes on, like I do think that you kind of like I think Annie, or at least if we're in Annie's shoes, we do warm up to the crowd that we're
Yeah.
surrounded by. And I think it's purposeful and like in like how they frame her and Igor like getting closer and closer together. Um, and the car, just the idea of them in the car together, like going around New York City, brings them physically together, and I think it's just a
Mm-hmm.
smart choice, even though it is kind of like a simple it's a simple dynamic at its core, but it's just simple dynamic really done well.
Yeah, let's talk about Igor. I thought he was charming.
Hmm.
Um, in the
He's
weirdest
really
way
great.
possible. Yeah. I really like you brought it up. I really like the cinematography choice they made of like just framing the two of them together. Like they don't say much to each other and she sure as hell isn't interested in him. But
No.
it's just nice. It's nice because I think it gives us, the audience, another alternate path to root for. Because I think if that Igor little romance line wasn't present, then it would have felt like a very grim story where Vanya was her only hope, or like was her only hope at like love, I guess. And he was being taken away from her. So it would have been very easy to feed into that despair. Instead, we now start thinking, well, this guy is like so much better. Like, go for him. So I think it gave us another little thing to root for. And I thought that was really cool.
He was really likable. You get so endeared to him throughout the story that you do kind of root for their relationship, or at least their friendship. They're coming
Hmm.
together, and when by the end that does succeed in a sense, I
Hmm.
think it feels like um, it feels like that storyline wrapped up well. And I was a bit worried that um, when they were getting on the plane and everything, that maybe we wouldn't get that closure that we needed. But then they were like, "Oh no, you get to stay with her." It's like that's perfect. I'm so glad they get to stay together.
You actually thought they would cut it after he hands her the ring and that she would
Mhm.
walk away from him. And I would have been very upset if that was the choice they made. So I don't know what like test screen audience asked for closure or like who made that decision, but I'm really happy that they did. And I thought that final scene was just so incredibly powerful. Um, like it gave me goosebumps. It was really, really good. Both of them performed really well. Their chemistry was just on point, and especially in that last scene, it was such a powerful scene to end things on. Their chemistry was great. The story really was like building up their relationship throughout, so this definitely felt like the pinnacle. Um, but I also really like that they didn't throw in like a big romantic gesture at the end where she's like, "But I loved you all along," or anything like that. I thought it was very real and very grounded while still weirdly feeling like a fairy tale. And I really, really enjoyed that scene.
And it does kind of end in like the most Anora fashion with instead of a kiss, it's like I'm gonna hop in your lap and
Yep.
I won't describe the details after that. But then it becomes so sad and
Just raw
the
and yeah.
cinematography. Oh, the
Mm-hmm.
cinematography in that scene with the snow piling up on the car, and
Mm-hmm.
it just you can tell it's getting colder and the colors almost are like changing. It's like getting more blue. I really
Yeah.
thought that was a brilliant scene.
Yeah. I really did that. I like that would be my favorite scene in the film. Like weirdly even beating out the fight sequence, which I really, really enjoyed.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, was there something that didn't work out for you in this?
So for the most part, I really love this film. But if I did have one thing that I did have a bump for me, it's that I don't feel like we get to know what Honora or Annie is really like as a
Mm-hmm.
character. Um, Now, I do think there is some intentionality behind that because at the end of the day, Vanya isn't someone who wants to get to know Annie. He just wants
Right.
to have fun. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we're not getting to know her. I mean, we know what her work is like. We know some of those relationships. We know about her roommate, and that she isn't like the most wealthy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, this is not a character that we get to actually know. It's more so all of these assumptions are made about her, like with the
Mm-hmm.
mom of Vanya, basically
Yeah.
just presuming who she is, and all of them
Yeah.
calling her a prostitute.
Right.
So I think part of it is the point that we shouldn't know a lot about it, Annie,
Mm-hmm.
and near the end we get a little bit more. But I do think there is. I feel like there was some room for some development there, because there is a part of the movie where it does feel like she's not really doing much. Her hands are a bit
Mm-hmm.
tied, but there could have been, I think, a conversation that maybe
Yeah.
advanced her character just a little bit more. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
like that little bit would have just gone a long way for me. What about you?
I agree. I think that's a really cool observation. For me, one thing that didn't particularly, I think some of the early editing choices didn't work for me, because I just thought that the montage of her and spending time with Vanya in the beginning just went on for so long. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
get it. They're kids, like they have money and they party. I don't know if I needed to see them get high in New York first and then get high on the plane again and then get high in Vegas. Like it was just, you know, um,
It's
cool. I get it. I
excessive.
get the point. Like, let's move on. I really was liking the story and was excited to know more, but I was forced to stay in a moment where I already knew kind of like what they were trying to say. That
Right.
kind of bumped for me a little bit. The other thing was, I know that they used a lot of anamorphic lenses. I just didn't understand the story reason behind them. Like I think it made sense in the dream sequences. It made sense when they were high or whatever. Like that was fine. Like it added to the story for me. The distortion of the world, I'm still trying to figure out like what the director was trying to achieve with that. But other than that, this was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. Um,
On
yeah.
the anamorphic lenses, I will say that is a big that is a thing that is frequently used in Baker's films.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not surprised that it ended up here. I was a little surprised that you said it bumped for you, because I do think that that scene in Vegas where it almost seems like it kind of almost feels like a walking like fisheye lens with how
Correct.
it's like warped. I do think that that is kind of just like a otherworldly moment where you feel like on top of the world. You know, that I feel like that's sort of what they were going for, but
Right.
maybe that
And
just worked for me and didn't work for you.
no, no, no. In those moments, I agree. Like I said, when they were high and when they were in like these dream
Mhm.
sequences, so to speak, that stuff worked for me. I think when she was in the car and I was seeing like I think I spotted maybe once or twice. Maybe it was an
Mhm.
anamorphic lens. It just kind of took me out of the story because I was trying to figure out what they were trying to like, what feeling they were trying to induce.
Mhm.
That's what I meant. Like one of the things I really look for in films is how immersed can it keep me in the world? Like, can it make sure that I'm just not on my phone? Can it make sure that I have forgotten the world outside? And I feel like sometimes when I noticed like a certain like framing choice or like a lens choice,
Mhm.
I just began to wonder, okay, like what is he trying to tell me? Because it wasn't coming through. Like that's what I meant when I said it didn't fully
Right.
work. But yeah,
That
otherwise
makes
everything was
sense.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Before we move into our usual ending topics, this film has been getting a lot of Oscar buzz, um, and I know that we'll be covering the Oscars this year
mhm,
as soon as the nominees are announced. Do you
mhm.
think that this has a chance to get into some of the top categories, such as Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Screenplay?
I might say best actress. I don't think best picture. I don't think best screenplay, unfortunately. But I think the actors or maybe best supporting actor. Those might definitely be a strong shot at a nomination. I don't know about any wins. How about you?
Well, I'm curious why you're unsure about it being in Best Picture. I mean, it did win the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival.
Um,
That's
I would
definitely
be very happy
a
if it.
big thing for it.
I'd be very happy if it got a best picture nom. I genuinely enjoyed it, and I think it would be a good film for everybody to watch. I don't know. This is just a gut uh, feeling. We'll see. We'll see how it plays
Is it
out.
lack of faith in the Academy?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I like we all know that we've all heard that the Academy Award run can be taxing, and it's not always as straightforward as we think it is. But besides that, I just I'm excited to see what they decide to do. What was your standout element in this film?
I'm gonna go with a character we have already discussed, but for me, it's got to be the character of Igor. I think he is really funny. I think that his arc is really interesting. I think he gets a lot of great character moments, especially when he stands up for Anora Annie at the end. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the actor who played him, Yura Borisov. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I think he delivers a great performance. I've heard he was also in a film called Compartment Number 6, which was nominated for Best
Mm-hmm.
International Feature a few years ago. So it makes me really want to check out some of his extra work because I really like that actor and that performance.
Yeah. No, he was solid. I really, really enjoyed it as well. I think for me, the dialogue is what stood out. I know we touched upon this
Mhm.
earlier. I just think it helped so much keep me in the world. It gave me so much information about these characters. Like it only took like a couple of lines of dialogue for me to learn enough about like most of them,
Yeah.
which which I found is rare. So I really, really enjoyed that. Let's move on to ratings. If you're new at the podcast, we do our ratings on the screenplay coverage scale, where we grade it as either pass, recommend, pass, consider, or recommend. These are not recommendations; they're just scores. That being said, how do you want to rate Anora?
I'm scoring Anora a strong recommend. I think that this film is really fun, really funny. I love the cinematography. I think that it is a must watch from this year, and I hope that people see it soon because it is a really it's probably the funniest film I've watched all year.
I'm on the same page. I'm going to give it a strong recommend as well. I loved it. And I think it's worth people's time and effort. Um,
What would you recommend? What film would you recommend for those that like Denora or want to see films that are similar to it?
um, I want to say Poor Things came out last year. It was an excellent film and it did very well at the Academy Awards last year. So it's a pretty well-known film, but I think in a very the films are very similar, I think, in terms of like kind of the feelings that they evoke. Um, I also think they're both
Right.
extremely well done, and I think people who watch films in that genre will definitely enjoy Poor Things. How about you?
I'm going to recommend a Swedish film that is called Lilia Forever. It is
Mm-hmm.
also a it's also about a character who involves herself with sex work, and it is also very dreamlike in that it kind of like flips back and forth between her real world problem where she also meets a character that she thinks is going to change her life, and
Mm-hmm.
then talking to her dead friend who is an angel who literally is wearing like these obviously costumed angel wings throughout the film, kind of like talking and getting advice about life. It's really interesting. I wouldn't say it's necessarily on the same quality as Anora, but if you like films that center around characters like Annie, I think
Mm-hmm.
Lilia Forever is definitely something that would be up your alley.
Cool. What is it on? Is it streaming online?
I think this is something that's pretty hard to find, so maybe keep an eye on like the Criterion channel or Google it, and you'll find a copy somewhere.
Nice. All right.
My goal on
Um,
this podcast is to recommend the most obscure things that I can. So
no, that's a good idea. I think maybe we should all start doing that.
yeah.
All right. What else have you been watching?
So I recently watched Look Back, which is also from this year. It is
Okay.
an anime film that is just around an hour, that is now streaming on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about two artists who start out as rivals and develop a friendship over their shared love and journey of creating art and comics. If you
Mm-hmm.
like anime, you will like this film. Also, just a warning, it is a very emotional film, so don't go in expecting any, you know, strange anime tropes. It's just something that's like centered and very humanistic and realistic. What about you? What else have you been watching?
Um, I watched this documentary called Nayantara, A Fairy Tale. Nayantara is an
Oh,
actress from South India. I grew up watching her on screen, and this is kind of a documentary about like her life, her career, and like her partner and their wedding. I thought it was interesting. The documentary itself was surrounded by a lot of controversy because the movie set on which they both met, her and her husband met and fell in love, they wanted to use footage from that movie in the documentary, but the producer of the film refused to give them the rights. And when they used like 3 seconds or something of like BTS footage in the documentary trailer, he filed a lawsuit against them. So the Tamil industry has been just really enjoying this drama. And I'm here for it. I'm excited to see where this goes. So yeah,
they
that's
might
what
have
I
to make
watched.
a follow-up documentary on all of the events.
I would watch that. I would watch that. I know so many more people would watch it. So, hey, if Netflix needs a documentary idea, they have all the material they need. So, yeah, that's what I've been watching. That's the drama that I've been engrossed in. It's been a fun week.
Well, I don't know much about that actress, but I do think, as I venture more into Bollywood films, maybe I'll come across her work and then check
Mhm.
out that documentary and feast on the drama myself.
I think you'll enjoy it. With that, we come to the end of this episode of the Pages to Pixels podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Keerthana,
And I'm Kevin.
and we will see you again next week with a brand new episode.